This is another episode of Beyond the Level where I, your host, Joey Spears, dive deep and tease out very important, impactful things that can improve your life, your quality, your mood, your feelings, your overall life expression to not just be normal, but to go beyond. And in this episode, I'm going to dive deep into hormones and what hormone optimization is. You know, hormones in general are very complex and convoluted and have a lot of different purposes. There's actually over 50 different hormones that regulate the different parts and processes of our body. And the ones in particular we'll focus on are some very important regulators for metabolism, for function, for mood, for weight loss, or building and muscle retention. We're also going to be talking about ones that are a little bit of the unsung heroes in the hormone world. But more importantly, this episode is going to be about recognizing what your body is trying to tell you, kind of more or less decoding what potentially might be going on. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, we are a bag of chemicals, and our body needs to operate appropriately and in balance. Everything from our blood pH to our oxygen saturation, our body is constantly trying to stay in an equilibrium of a homeostasis. And hormones are those chemical messengers to the organelles and parts of our body to help regulate all of that. So you can imagine when there's an imbalance, a off-setting or not properly functioning or producing level of hormones, your body can, of course, be out of alignment and be misshapen, mishapped, have all of the areas of those types of feelings, from mood to common mental clarity to weight to body changes, physical, mental, all of those all tie into the level in which our body chemically signals and is being received. So to give you an idea, hormones are super important. They can regulate things from metabolism, things like insulin regulation, thyroid control, how you use energy and energy expenditure. You have homeostasis from electrolyte balance, fluid, blood sugar again, body temperature. There's growth and development from sexual development, also bone, tissue, muscle growth, those types of things, sexual function and reproduction, which is a major one, and also mood and behavior. Even from the fight and flight responses, we'll go into cortisol and what all that means. But when you have a system that's in balance and being produced correctly, your body has a better immune system and operates more fully. You feel more like yourself. And when it comes down to hormones, the biggest takeaway is the signal. So we have a very, very powerful gland, the pituitary gland, a pea-sized gland in the middle of our brain. Essentially, that is the third eye of the body. It basically looks for outcomes, predicts, and receives, and is looking for production by signaling different organelles, by different hormone signals to get the response in the product. That is super important. Remember that. Pituitary signal maker, and it's a predictor and a seeker of outcomes, meaning it's looking for a response. And the response it's looking for is a product called a chemical signal hormone. So when the pituitary gland sends out things like, everything from follicular stimulating hormone, FSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, thyroid. It also sends out luteinizing hormones, goes to ovaries, to testes. It sends out growth hormone, which goes to the liver. And what it's looking for, though, is the response of hormone production. When that production is interfered with, is not produced at a stable or sufficient enough level the body's used to seeing or wants to see, it causes that signal not to shut off, but actually to work harder and harder and harder, so that when you do, like, for example, blood work, and you see that there's a higher level of a signal, let's say for thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, what it's saying is there's more signal than there is reception. Okay, that's important. So when it has to work harder to get the same response it's used to getting, meaning more of the product it's looking for, hormone, it continues to work and work and work and work. And that saturates the blood in more of a signal because the product is not there. The hormone is not there. So there is a depletion of a hormone. Now the other thing can happen where the signal's absorbed and received too much, and you have an overproduction. So it's all based on this signal. The signal from the pituitary to respond to production of actual hormones. So that's the basis of hormones in production. Hormones are the product that the pituitary gland is trying to tell it to work. This is important. I'm trying to nail this home because one of the things that happens in life for men is called andropause. Andropause is when the production of testosterone becomes depleted and the reception is not being received and the product is not being produced. So the signal stays high. And another part of process in female life is menopause. Menopause is usually accompanied with the idea that there is a decrease in estrogen production, right? What that means is a monthly cycle period, menstruation, ceases to happen, mainly because estrogen itself is not being produced, which one of the major purposes of estrogen is to build the lining of the uterus for egg implantation, for fertilization, and of course, babies. But when there's a pause, a menopause, there is a lack of production, and therefore you have different symptoms that the body's looking for in response to that. But the idea is the signal. For example, this one's follicular stimulating hormone. FSH begins to rise and signal, and similar in male, luteinizing hormone. But what that does, very interesting, we talked about the pituitary. That signal is not stopping. Regardless if you still have ovaries, you still have testes, the production is looking for is hormones. And when that signal continues to rise and rise and push and push and push and push and push and push, that signal is like a fire alarm off in the middle of the brain. That is the alarm. It's going off in the middle of the brain. Why is that important? Well, the middle of the brain, from a structural standpoint, the brain has different functions, different parts, and purposes. The center part of the brain is often called the primitive brain. Primitive in the sense that it is the old brain, but it works on a lot of the autonomic systems of the body, like breathing and heart beating, and we don't have to think about those things typically. So when this alarm is going off in the middle of the brain, it draws attention in there because, again, it's looking for the hormone production. Signal is going off. It's drawing attention to the center of the brain. The center of the brain is the primitive brain. Primitive is survival. Survival, right? Survival is on alert, anxious, maybe having sleep disturbances because, again, on alert, brain's not shutting off. Pulling away from the higher functioning part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is the new brain, neocortex. When you pull away from the higher functioning part of the brain, because of this attention in the center, you take away from the hopes, the dreams, the desires, the passions, the personality, who you are sits here. So now you're getting less of your expression of who you are and more into a primitive mindset. Also primitive, we talked as survival. Survival's great when you're trying to survive. But when you're in a constant state of survival, your body changes. So our species has a great and long history of surviving, but also not knowing when our next meal would be. So when we're in survival mode, we consume energy, food, and it goes to storage because we don't know when our next meal is. Now, fast forward millennia, and we are now probably arguably at the highest caloric availability in our species history, at least in the Western world. So even if we're in survival mode and we still are consuming, we have our next meal, it goes to storage. That's important because hormones are responsible for metabolism and regulation of weight. In particular, testosterone. We also have regulations with thyroid, insulin, those types of things. Now, when you are in survival mode and you're still consuming food for energy because you're hungry and you need energy to survive, and it goes to storage and not being used, what happens? Low energy. You have lower energy potential, you have more fatigue, you have muscle fatigue, mental fatigue, because you're not using the full potential of the energy you are consuming. So you have a low energy, right? We've heard that. Or I have slumps, or I'm wearing out, I feel burnt out, I'm needing a nap. Why is that happening? When you're in survival mode, you're not using your energy appropriately. You're storing it. So you store extra energy, calories, as fat. So then you go into this, I'm carrying weight. All of that because the signal is forcing you into survival mode, because the signal's rising and rising and rising, and now you're trapped in this survival primitive brain, and you're having those type of cycles. You're not repairing, you're not building, you're not having those desires, libido. You're not thinking about that when you are in survival mode, right? Those are not the prosperous thoughts or actions. So your body changes because of storage, it becomes weaker, you have lower energy, you have sleep disturbances, your mood changes, you are more on edge, you have more of a shorter temper potentially because you're on edge in survival. But how do you break that? How do you get out of survival and enter thrival? Your prefrontal cortex, back to the higher functioning parts of your brain, higher functioning optimal body. You give the signal what it's looking for, and that's hormones. Now, there's a lot of different hormone therapies out there. I obviously am very passionate about one in particular. It's bioidentical because of its safety, and it's also longevity, and it's chemically recognized as your body as you, so it's a lot easier. But the answer is give it what it's looking for, and your body breaks that cycle, breaks out of survival and enters thrival. I see a lot of patients for hormone therapy at my clinic, and one of the first things I hear when we follow up with them and after they've done hormone therapy with us is, I feel more like myself, how I'm used to feeling. And that is a home run, because I know what that means physiologically, mentally, is that break has happened. Breaking out of survival, entering thrival, being more frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex driven of who you are. That's what I am proud to say I give back to people, is give them back who they are. And that is optimization. That is the difference between just being in the normal, which on future episodes I'm going to get into more specifics on testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, what levels look like, and what is called normal, bunny ears. And it's funny because the normals that they have are typically based on what labs say they normally see. Doesn't mean it's normal for you, doesn't mean those symptoms aren't related to a level you're at, but they have studies and research on levels of optimization to reach and break the cycle, give the body what it's looking for at an efficient, safe, sustainable rate. That's what it is. So the big takeaway in this is I want you to understand that hormones are the chemical tool, but what it's addressing is the mental chemical imbalance. Hormones are the chemical signal, but the signal to produce and regulate and control the amount is a brain balance issue. I tell patients all the time, we don't necessarily treat hormones for the sake of hormone therapy. We treat the brain and the brain balance. That's when you talk about hormone imbalance, it's related to the brain. So you have better cognition, better clarity, better mood, better creativity, better desire, better passions, better who you are when you're at a balanced, regulated, optimal state of hormone production, not only physically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. That is the home run when you address and signal and monitor that change. We see those signals come down and it's not saturating the blood and causing this fire alarm in the middle of the brain, the primitive brain. Exit primitive. Get back to this area of who you are and you feel the best. But yeah, hormone therapy is a game changer, a life changer. It is a recognized, becoming more mainstream. And 50, 80 years ago, unfortunately, there were little to no answers for women, for men, and that was just part of getting older. That's not the answer anymore. That's not the mainstay. There are solutions to do it and give yourself more quality of life, more life at the end of your years than just years at the end of your life, and give you back who you are, who you want to be, who you worked your whole life to be, and you get that back by addressing it in your brain and allowing you to, again, my big, bald, 5 head, get back to that part. That is the answer. So we'll be getting more into what those approaches are, what to look for, how to test. That's very important. We'll be talking about common myths and other things that are kind of changing, thank goodness, from what the norm is to what acceptable, optimal is, and all the studies around that. And we'll be talking about even safety measures that are now being understood better about hormone therapy, its cardioprotective nature, it's helping prevent cancers, not cause them. That's a big one too. We'll get into that. But I want you to remember that hormone therapy is more than just an injection, a cream, a patch, a pellet. It's addressing your brain and giving back you to who you used to and who you want to be. And that can happen at different ages. That can happen at different times of life for different reasons. Hormones like testosterone and estrogen and other things are affected by different things in our life. The communication of production and the depletion of production happen for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of it's influenced by what we eat, what we think, how we think, mood, stressors, and those other hormones like cortisol, for example. That's a big highlighted one right now. I see it all over my socials. Cortisol, cortisol, cortisol. Go get your cortisol checked. I have to tell you that cortisol is the hardest thing probably to measure accurately, and is a bogus thing. If someone's going to charge you for a cortisol test, it's ridiculous because you have like a very specific maybe hour window at the beginning of the day to get an accurate representation of cortisol, because it will get completely ruined throughout the day. So it's not as vital a thing to address, really, maybe controlling your cortisol, but cortisol is a stress response. And it does bring down the production ability of the thrival hormones like growth hormone, sometimes even insulin-related hormones, also testosterone, because those are thrival mechanisms, right? Cortisol, well, when it floods the system for any given reason, any time of the day, for any specific point of stressor, can decrease the potential for production on those thrival mechanisms, i.e. testosterone, for example. When cortisol goes up, it's going to compete against the production of testosterone, right? And even estrogen at some levels, growth hormone, those things can affect blood sugar, insulin resistance type of measures. But rather than just addressing cortisol, which is a constant battle, let's face it, stress is stress, life is life. But why not supplement with hormone therapy, example, testosterone to compete against this now competing other stress hormone. That actually lowers cortisol more effectively than some of these bogus supplements that are coming out all over the place. It annoys me, to tell you the truth, because it's not addressing the problem, it's addressing the measurement on an unregulated, very irregular test, and they're not even following up with tests. Anyways, to compete against cortisol, you need the proper thrival mechanism called testosterone, for example. Competes now the other way with cortisol. So stress is a major killer of thrival hormones. Processed foods, some medications, a lot of medications, to tell you the truth. Alcohol is another one. We used to always say it's the 3 Bs that kind of kill thrival hormones like testosterone. 3 Bs, bacon, bourbon, and life. So cortisol, stress, cholesterol, the bad stuff, and alcohol are the major 3 killers, but primarily being a stress hormone. It can be adrenaline, it can be other stressor hormones. Cortisol is the easy one to come out with. Those compete against the thrival mechanisms. So now your body is now still trying to get the production, but it's now competing against the production because of these other ones coming in and competing against the production of the thrival. When you go back to survival, again, high stress environment, your body is not able to produce efficiently the thrival mechanisms and hormones related to that, because you're not thinking about, desire, hopes, dreams, passions, mood regulation, body improvement, growth and muscle and repairing of, disrepair and even bad cells in your body. When you're in survival, you're trying to survive. So those other hormones take an effect because the body thinks you are in a very dire situation. So to flip that, you give it what it's looking for, and that is hormone specific things like addressing thyroid, addressing if there's any growth hormone deficiencies, also testosterone and estrogen. Very, very important take-homes, men and women. Men, of course, testosterone is the primary hormone produced at a very high level. But guess what? Testosterone is also the #1 produced hormone in women. That's right. You think estrogen. Estrogen is like 1/10 of a ratio compared to the amount of testosterone dilution and production in the body when it comes to a female. There is some estrogen importance in males as well, but really estrogen is the relationship to reproductive cycles related to the uterus in particular with women, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But testosterone is the #1 hormone produced in women and in men. So it tells you the body has a lot of important things it needs to do with it, and it wants to grow and prosper and have these enlightenment, growth, and thriving mechanisms. And that's why testosterone is so highly produced and focused on by the body. And without it, the body reverses. You have those effects like physical changes, weight gain, mood irregularity, aggression, even with low testosterone. That is the truth. You're in a stressed state, you're more aggressive, short-tempered, moody, irritable, you have sleep disturbances, you have body temperature irregularities, you also have low libido, which is sexual desire and drive, because again, you're not in that thrive, so you don't have the drive. And then of course you have lack of motivation, inspiration, because those again are higher functioning, which needs that push, that drive to access. And that's what you need, is that hormone component of balance to push you into that state. So if you feel like, you're not who you used to be, or you feel like you want a better quality of who you are, and you're having some of these symptoms, get checked. Nowadays, it's very easy, very simple. And unfortunately, you have to ask for it at your normal kind of visits, but check your levels. See what you are currently at. The timing in which the tests are done, don't worry about it. It influences it a little bit if it's earlier in the morning for testosterone, and if it was fasting or not. Just go get it done. It's not that going to change that much. But also, we'll talk on probably the next episode what levels are and what optimal, normal, suboptimal, low looks like in some of the things that I test in my clinic every day, and what we look at and how we look at things differently. And that's the big takeaway is when you go to a hormone specialist or someone that knows in the medical field what hormone therapy is and the benefits and what normal is versus optimal, it's a different world than if you go to a general place that just looks at a lab sheet and is looking for an H for high and an L for low. And if it falls anywhere in their normal ranges, they completely discount you in anything and don't validate how you feel. I hear that a lot, unfortunately, at my clinic. I have men and women come in like, oh, they told me I was just normal and to get over it. Or I'm old and that's part of life. It drives me insane. Luckily, things are changing, but there's so much more and so much more research, evidence-backed data that shows the opposite of what traditional normal means. So I hope you got a lot out of this. This is kind of like Hormone 101, optimization, importance, the thrival mechanisms, and the importance of having good balanced hormones, and the signs that you might be experiencing imbalances or deficiencies and what that looks like. And the takeaway is get tested. But once you get tested, you got to know how to differentiate from what is normal and then optimal, which in the next episode we're going to get really deep into. We're going to talk about the different hormone therapies, but it all starts with your levels and values and if they're correlated and what to look at, which ones specifically to check for, and other ones you don't need to check. There's a lot of different hormone tests. There's a lot of different markers. There's really like 4 or 5 that are take home that can actually mean something, and we'll get more into that. But I hope you got a lot of information about the signal and what it's looking for, and when that signal is rising and out of this world level high and what that does. I really hope you got something from that. But stay tuned for future episodes. Next one we're getting into hormone levels, testing, and options for therapy. Thanks so much.